Some species of trees have a root system underground that interconnect the individual trunks and weave the individual trees to create a more stable whole, so they can't be so easily blown down in the wind. Does that not remind you of some of the people we have here in Sooke? People whose roots have woven the very stability and foundation upon which much of Sooke has been built. Tonight, it is my great pleasure to introduce a member of our community whose roots have done just that. Please welcome to the stage, Phoebe.
I just got to see if this is working. It is so nice to see so many people here this evening coming out in the snow, and many old friends. But especially, I want to just say a comment about Finn. Finn, where are you? You did fabulous. You're a hard act to follow. Anyway, hooray to the Unger family. So this evening, there's going to be a number of images, not too many, but I'm going to kind of stick to my script because I've crafted some words. Anyway, my voice, living in the land of cedar, living in Sooke, so rich, its culture, people, and geography, as diverse. Who am I? I'm known in Sooke usually by the activities I have pursued over the years. I've been known as an adventurous, a West Coast paddler, community educator, one who's messed around in boats, a backcountry hiker and skier, a trail builder. Some have called me a trailblazer, a foodie, even an alto for a time in our community choir, and for the last 13 years or so, a wood artist. I am a carver, and wood is my friend. The reverence for wood, it feeds my soul. It guides me to find and sustain the balance for all that I do, and it has become my voice. And my voice is me. It is a voice of confidence, a voice that engages others. I share experiences, resources, and stories. My voice is one of energy, creativity, and enthusiasm. I am fortunate that I see nature's world through a very different lens. Come with me into the forest. Some of my friends are in here, but they don't know they're being projected. Walk amongst the trees. The wise say trees feed our spirits, and I believe that. For some, there is a seamless transition from the home to the woods. What inspires us wood carvers? Of all the wood carvers and wood artists I have had the pleasure to meet, regardless of how different we may be, the desire and the need to be in the forest to revere and respect is huge. We all share this unique source of inspiration, the serenity, the awe, the wonderment of nature, fused with art. Take me to the forest, a refrain our friends and their children echo when they come to visit Bob and I in Sooke. For those of us who love to be in the forest and wilds, we seize every opportunity to go out and search and source the wood, to bring it home to our sheds, to season it, to ponder about it. What might it become? Some of you, maybe later or maybe at intermission, you might have seen some of the creations I've just done up in the last month. But they reflect what a lot about this talk is this evening, and I hope you get a chance to see it. We forage wood in clear cuts, ancient forests, bogs, woodlands, and at the river's edge or out on the west coast wild beaches. Wood is one of the most vibrant and natural materials treasured around the world. Its seemingly endless varieties, the breadth of color, grain, and diversity. It's resilient. It gives, it's adaptable, it moves and breathes with the climate. The same can be said of our people who live here. The comparisons and similes are very many. Working with the wood, to create something with our own hands, to be artistic, is what one artist known well in Victoria, Robert Bateman, believes may be the essence of what it is to be human. We learn to use the old tools and adapt to new technologies. They say woodworking strengthens our self-reliance, confidence, sense of conservation, and promotes a healthy development to our environment. Our use of wood inspires creativity and ingenuity, simplicity, and beauty. Using the wood, do we use all of the tree? Yes, if we can. There's the roots, the bark, the withes, limbs, burls, and symmetrical trunks for lumber. However, it's usually just one part of the tree that we use. Sometimes we use roots. The beginning of some of my early career was working with wood and roots. I had the pleasure of leading a number of summer paddle trips down the San Juan River in the 90s with a lot of friends. We gathered roots from the riverbanks to make baskets, being mentored by our friends who learned the basketry art from Sooke's Granny Sue. Paddling the San Juan River, visiting the huge, impressive spruce trees, camping out, swimming in the cold river, and weaving baskets under the blue skies. Much later, years later, we discover where to salvage bigger cedar roots shaped by their efforts to seek water and nutrients. Roots that became decorative and whimsical pieces of wood art. So you might ask, what's the connection with what Phoebe's saying about being in the forest and coming out of the woods? How does the forest, its trees, its awe and wonderment, and living in Sooke beget such positive experiences and legacies that Tania mentioned? Where and how did it all begin for me? What was rooted in those early days of living in Sooke during my midlife? Jeff Bateman thinks I've lived here half a century, but Jeff, where are you? It's not a half a century. It might look that old, but we came in 1979. And the most important thing about getting grounded in a new community was to get to know your community. It's absolutely essential. And yet you must take, not the courage, but make the effort to go beyond your garden gate, get to know your neighbors, and getting connected. Getting to know what the volunteer ethic is very helpful. You gotta understand and maybe try and grasp what is that all about, because if you don't get it, you might be left behind. Having fun, going beyond your own sense of self, and eventually, if you should so choose, you may end up serving your community. Here are some of the geography, landscapes, and connecting activities that helped me find my voice. Back in the mid-'80s, a number of us in Sooke were invited to join in on some really incredible searches for big trees. The lure of the tall and big trees on Vancouver Island. Some were real, some turned out to be mythical, but they did exist in somebody's head. The adventures were many. We took helicopters into areas that were very remote, rivers and mountains where there were no roads. And later we learned to hike into some of these areas. Getting to know the key players was the next step that gave me some of the roots of how I was able later to lead many projects. The key players in the early 1990s was actually BC Parks. They came to Sooke and invited a number of us to submit proposals, which we did. And some of it even included the trail up on the San Juan Ridge, the Kludak. But getting to know who some of these people were, and some of the people involved with the conservation of Carmanah, which we were involved with, and also it led to the development of the Wantafuka Trail. But what was really important was establishing these kind of relationships. So when, in 1989, we were asked at the school, I worked for the school then, when we were asked, who wants to build a Spanish replica longboat for Sooke's bicentennial? Well, of course, by then, we knew enough people to know, well, where are we going to get the lumber and the wood and all the different materials that we needed to successfully build 2 boats? And that we did. Then, after the launching, we should have a few, oh, good, you're gone. Thanks, Tristan. Kind of forgot about the images. You're following me. Anyway, after the launching, we went into a lot of different activities. The list just goes on and on, but it included king boat competitions all over the Pacific Northwest, festivals, classic wooden boat shows, incredible voyages including going up to Nootka and a lot of remote places on the west coast of Vancouver Island, including the Gulf Islands. There were sea camps. It just went on and on. This is the kids sailing into Victoria That might have been for the Commonwealth Games. And then most recently, this was the women. They've been rowing these boats now for 28 years. Talk about sustainability. It's one thing to create and develop a project, but for it to last, like the Kludak Trail and a number of other projects, that's on the day in August when there was the solar eclipse. And they were rowing it didn't get very dark in Sooke, but they're just rowing away. It's the most beautiful shot, but it really pays tribute to the women who have held this project together. The next thing is becoming friends of the Sooke Nation, and I'm sorry Linda Bristol and some of the band's not here this evening. But this picture is very telling. After the bicentennial, we got to know a lot of the people in forestry, as I mentioned, and one day they asked us what would we like, what do we really need in Sooke? And the people that I were with, we worked with the band and we said, we need big trees, tall trees, to help the Sooke Nation carve some canoes for the big paddle to Bella Bella in 1993. And these trees, you had to go far because cedars that grow on the coast, the grain isn't correct. And they're not tall enough and they're not tapered. And you really need to go at least 30 miles inland. Well, we had permission to go into these interlands. And if you look carefully, there's a figure at the top of the tree. Do you see it to the right of that big burl? Well, that's Mayo Wickham, and he's in his late 70s. And he's up there topping the tree, which is extremely dangerous. But those are long days up in the woods, and many of the Sooke Nation people came with us, and lots of people were there. But that resulted in some incredible canoes being carved, the teaching of carving, and a terrific renaissance of the pride of working and making canoes. So we feel very proud to be part of that. And then, let's see, another one. We've got some close-ups. This is Chief Gordon Plains and Shirley Alphonse getting ready to greet some of the canoes that have been coming into Sooke Harbor almost every summer for the tribal journeys. And this was actually in 2008. It's tradition from many hundreds of years for anybody who comes in to see the Sooke people, they have to wait at the spit and be welcomed. And if you're not welcomed, you have to paddle away. And these were the many canoes that came in that particular day in July, and they're waiting to be welcomed and being told it's okay to enter into the harbor. Sooke, in the end, after all the logs and sheds that were built, ended up carving over 8 canoes, and they're all still in their canoe shedding down at the river. This is just some of the canoes where Sooke Nation greeted their guests. And it's really nice to know that they too, like the longboats, have developed a program that's very sustainable, and some of their young people now know how to carve. Next. Sourcing the wood for the natives also included some wonderful native art that you've probably seen. This welcoming pole was carved and raised before the big opening. And these are some of the people one evening that raised that, and that was blessed. And the blessing included that it need not be destroyed or vandalized, and it's never been touched. And then part of the opening ceremony included the gifting from Sooke Nation of a small canoe called Kepaset Lelem, and you may have seen it as hanging up outside in the foyer there. And Kepaset Lelem is Salish for coming together to learn. So we've been very lucky to be part of that. Next, gifting. I just threw this in. We've learned a lot from our native friends. And this is gifting of some of Phoebe's big halibut plates. And this was with Gordy and Shirley and my kicks. And that was the opening of the CRD building. But we've really learned a lot about gifting, which is kind of nice. The next project was Kludak, and I think a lot of you have heard of Kludak. It's quite a legacy that a number of the Sooke have left. We've been up there on San Juan Ridge for about 30 years. There's many, many stories, but I'm just going to show you. This is a log cabin that we built up at Noyes Lake in 1996. And there's if I'm ever invited back, there's some awesome stories about where these logs came from, what happened, who broke their foot. Anyway, we go there I'm not as active as I used to be, but next slide. It's beautiful in the winter. Most winters there's 8 or 10 feet there, but not every winter because climate has changed. Next. Part of CLUDAC includes education and interpretation, and lots of students from Sooke and Edward Milne, and with Canada World Youth. These students are from Uganda. They helped us one summer. It's a big story, so I'm not going to go into that. But a lot of the connections that we'd had resulted in building a very special interpretive tea hut. And this is the beginning. And those are the students, and that's my husband, Bob, there. And this is up on the ridge looking north into the San Juan Valley. Next. That's 1 year later. Now, a lot of you here in Sooke have probably been on the lily walks. We usually end up going to the interpretive hut. And these are just some of Sooke's citizens enjoying it in the little huts just behind you. You can see that it's cabled because it can be pushed over with winter snows. The CLUDAC projects are really something. And I say that there's something because it's really something to make sure that you have the ability to sustain all this. Anyway, back to the land and the food movement. Sooke's neighbors and neighborhoods are many that have supported some really nice community garden initiatives. And some of the early folks, like David and Carol Mallett, are here this evening. But we had a lot of fun developing a community garden in 2005 at CASA, which people mentioned earlier. And then I think everybody knows the Sun River story. We're now going into our 10th summer. But this is the beginning. But once again, for all the landscaping we did, we went back to the hills. We learned how to use the cedar. And you can see the kind of landscaping and garden structure that we ended up doing. Then Phoebe wood. You don't know who that is, but I've teased around Sooke. Phoebe would, wouldn't you? So that's the apple shack at the community garden where the orchard is. So next, Tristan. Phoebe wood in her carving shed. In 2005, I got a carving shed, and what a thrill, because I finally had a place to call my own, where I could store all the raw, found woods, seasoned, weathered, sawdust, roots, burls, slabs, stumps, tools, and dreams. A year ago, next, that's the studio where I store a lot of stuff. As I mentioned, half the fun is salvaging. And a year ago, a friend from Achosin called and said, a big Gary oak came down, and would I gather some of my woodworking friends, and we could come and salvage some of it. Well, it's just a giant of a tree. And we were told that a healthy Gary oak lives for 300 years. It takes another 100 years to get sick and die, and then another 100 years to fall over. So we were told that probably this tree had been standing for 500 years. But you can see that the next photo will show you some of the really nice, very interesting grains. There's a guy over in East Sooke. I don't know his last name, but his name is Al. He has this wonderful mill, and we've got 4-foot wide slabs for tables. They're probably too heavy ever to carry. But it's fun to dream about what might be possible. Bringing it all back home. Is Periel still here? Did she go? Oh, hey, Periel. We're now getting back into bringing it all back home. A new story with many voices. This evening you've probably heard a lot about the voices. 2 years ago, we started a project, Out of the Woods, Woodworkers Along the Salish Sea. This artistic book took 2 years to do, and now it's 2 years later, and it's now in the hands of Heritage House Publishing with the distribution in the fall of 2018. This incredible story of 26 woodworkers living along the Salish Sea from the Sooke area up to Denman Island. I'm going to show you a little bit about the Denman Island. Oh, that's public art, but you guys don't really know about that. It's in the Premier's office. We need to go forward, Kristen. A couple of these images are just of some of the last artists that we filmed in November. Michael Dennis. But he too, as an artist, has great faith in knowing where to salvage wood. His farm on Denman, when we arrived, was misty and foggy with a little bit of snow on the ground, but we just never seen an example of such salvaged wood that had so much spirit. And it almost looked like not Stonehenge, but Woodhenge. And it was all through the farm and the fields, all around his house. It was very, very inspiring. Next. It was really ghostly. It was very mystical. So our book team, we're very grateful to Periel. Sorry, Periel, I'm kind of singling you out here. But this is our book team. And I mention this because Periel, with her writing skills, she's the writer on the book team, along with the two photographers, Roth and Ramberg from Alberta, they were able to capture the voice of many and translate that into stories. And that is very, very, very exciting for us to do all that other stuff in the community with wood and have that reverence for wood and end up with the book that'll be a wonderful story for many to behold. I'm going to close now with a call to action. My voice is the outcome of being engaged, being an integral part of the Sooke community. Being passionate is certainly part of it. None of this really crystallized until I was well into my midlife. My tip and call to you is develop your own voice. Believe that you can become something more than you ever thought possible. Get those roots established. Enjoy many life experiences. Take some risks. Allow yourself to travel different paths. Remember to seize opportunities like we did. Be one with yourself and your community. Remember, wood is a little like us, a little rough on the outside, perhaps weathered, but go a little deeper. Reveal the strong, unique, colorful grain. The beauty in that grain is your voice. Your voice can be the story written in wood. Thank you.